Hello and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Domingo.
And I'm your co-host, Virginia Grenier.
We'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy some inspiring conversation. Here at Language of the Soul, we know that life is story. Individually, we're the products of the stories we tell about ourselves. Culture is the amalgamation of the stories we weave about the human condition. Here's the thing. Individually and collectively, we can write our own story. Thanks for tuning in and joining in the march toward human potential. Joan Marie creates art with an exuberant passion for life. Her visionary art began with a profound spiritual connection to Michelangelo. At age 19, standing in delirious awe under Michelangelo's Sistine ceiling in Rome, she said, "If art can be this powerful, I must be an artist." Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo continued to communicate with her and fill her soul to this day. With the completion of her MFA, her art career began with ethereal drawings, quickly achieving national and international agency representation. As a result, her work was licensed by multiple companies, selling on millions of products and purchased by hundreds of private collections around the world. Driven by a passion of music, abstract music painting is intuitively transforming the energy of one's favorite song into a wild and mystical abstract painting. These high-energy abstracts led her to a powerful combination of Da Vinci draftsmanship and fluid abstract expressionism. Currently, she has a waiting list to co-create your personal power portrait, expressing her patron's deepest passions and unique higher selves. Reflecting on your power portrait heightens love of self in connection with your soul. According to Joan, love of self is where compassion begins. She asks that you join her, knowing that falling in love with yourself helps to make the world a better place. Welcome, Joan Marie.
Woo! Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Fabulous, fabulous.
Right on. Welcome, Virginia.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad
Wow.
to get to know Joan better. Woohoo! I'm all quiet.
It's a party. Yeah, it's pretty early on a Sunday morning, but feels like a party to me.
Absolutely.
Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I guess for our listeners, I will say, if you've listened into Greg Spalenka's episode, Joan is a dear friend of Greg's, as am I. So we have that. We share that mutual connection. And I personally think the world of Greg, so I trusted him. And everything I've seen of you, I've stalked you online, of course, like I do all my guests. And I'm feel very lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you. I love Greg. The connection is dynamite, isn't it? So exciting to expand with other human beings like that. Woo!
Yeah, exactly. He's been a huge, huge influence in my life.
Huge.
And I didn't hold back on our podcast.
No, it was wonderful.
Oh, you heard it. Good. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Well, for me, this podcast, among many other, right, I think, Virginia, you'd agree, it's serving us in a number of ways, not just our listeners and our patrons, but it's therapy for us. So for me, it's just kind of renewing your faith, right? As an artist, you have to remind yourself why you do what you do. But as a human being, it takes hope to get up every morning. So this podcast has been a reminder to me of, you know what, there are some pretty cool people left in the world. And going back to the early 90s, which is when I met Greg, there were some characters that I don't know if I took them for granted, but they seem a little more scarce these days. And so, yeah, reconnecting with Greg just brought me back to a really pivotal time in my life, a formative time, right, where your worldview is being sort of cemented. And I'm grateful for that. Where did you meet Greg, out of curiosity?
Through the class artist as a brand. My daughter lived in where Greg lived, and I had known about him, and I anxiously went to his wife's beautiful perfume store and just sort of hung out, praying that I could meet him in person.
Was that in Santa Fe or when he was still in California?
Thousand Oaks. It was
okay, right.
Yeah, where she had that beautiful perfume store on the second floor. So I hung out there, and then she said that he would be appearing, in a few hours. So I waited and waited, and I got to meet him in person, and then we talked, and I signed up for his Artists of Brand and flew back to take the class with him one-on-one with my daughter. It was just paradise. It was just wonderful. So everything about it.
Yeah, I'm a fan for sure, and not to mention his work.
Yes. Oh
It's just
gosh.
so
Oh
beautiful, as is
gosh.
yours. Yeah, beautiful work.
Thank you.
I love, and does seem mixed. I don't want you to give away all your secrets, but and we're not really here to talk about technique. I think the impetus behind the work and the inspiration behind the work is what we're here to talk about. But it is mixed media, correct? There's a lot going on
Yes. Yes. Whatever it calls for.
Right. Spill some coffee on it, drive your truck over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when I did the abstracts for 4 years. Like if you do spill coffee, you're like, oh, this could be cool.
Right, right. I think it's called a happy accident, right?
Yeah.
Happy
I'm not
accident.
afraid at all. I just like, oh, well, that was magic or a blessing. Let's see where this goes,
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, I do want to talk to you for sure about the personal power portraits as well as the music paintings and the ethereal drawings. But before we dive, yeah, there's a lot to follow up on. And I earnestly have some questions about all three of those because it seems like those are the major phases of your career so far. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
as along with the licensing aspect.
Mhm.
But before we do that, we're starting to ask a rote question, and based on a little dirty laundry for our listeners, we have a form, of course, that all of our guests fill out, so that we can all impart what is on our radar at this moment. And so in your form, I get it. You have a huge appreciation of story. I see how it informs your work. I look forward to hearing everything you have to say. But a rote question we've been asking at the top of every episode in our new season here is, what do you feel traditionally has been the role of storytelling in culture?
At culture, I mean, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey has been my inspiration ever since when he first came out with it, when he was living and he was sharing that. I mean, I was just glued to the TV watching those interviews with him. And the hero's journey was just it just seemed to help me make sense of the roller coaster of life.
Mm,
And it got me into spaces because my art had become, expressions of the spiritual challenges I was going through, like we all go
mm,
through.
mhm,
And so I would express a work of art that would express whatever I had learned, to
mhm,
whatever challenge I was facing. And it just made sense, to like when you're going through the ups and downs, like if you can create that story in your mind, that hero's journey story, it just adds such adventure and excitement to it, instead of wondering why me, or why
mm,
this, or why, like it just so yeah, in brief summary, that's what has inspired me.
mhm. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. Are you talking about the BBC series that became The Masks of God? I think that was from, right, a BBC series.
Yeah, who was interviewing him? Bob, was it Bobson? Oh gosh, I can't remember. I mean, I can see his face and I can't remember.
I don't remember, but I know I liked the book because it was a conversation, right? It was almost like
Yeah.
letters to a young poet. It was an exchange, and you
Hmm.
just get to be a fly on the wall and sort of listen in.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, I was pretty that was all so new that I didn't really grasp the depth of all of it, but there was a
Mhm,
general feeling, that
mm,
allowed me to soar, because it's all about soul. I mean, that's why I love the topic of your book and your top podcast, the soul. I mean, that's all there is soul. And that's what's
right.
that
Well,
that's what started the whole journey.
I love that. Yeah, it is a funny word though, because people have different connotations and denotations, and right, it's easily projected on. So I jokingly hear myself say, if I use the word spiritual in the wrong circles, right, or the word soul, with spiritual, I just go, oh, no, 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 don't be threatened. I'm talking about Oprah's spirituality. Like, you make it mainstream. And then with the word soul, I just go, well, it's anything that's not your body, or it's everything that's not your body. Like, you can't really argue with the concept that your thoughts and your feelings and your emotional journey, right? Your emotional maturation, there is a spiritual journey, and it's just a word that I think people get hung up on.
Yeah.
and for good reason too. I think, institutionalized religion had its day, and then, we're kind of, I think there's been a backlash against it, but in my parlance, you don't throw away the spiritual baby with the religious bathwater, if that makes sense.
Oh gosh, completely. I mean, that's overthinking. I just keep thinking about overthinking, how we overanalyze, trying to figure
Mhm,
it out. Well, we're never going to figure it out. We just need to follow our soul,
mhm,
which is our intuition, which is our, if we just trust what our passions are, what our skills are, and just, that's our meaning for life, is
beautiful.
is that is that is just following that drive that we have inside, and being paying attention to what our skills are and just
Mhm.
going with it instead of asking so many questions
I know
along
we're
the way.
overcomplicating this thing.
Yeah,
Right.
it stops you so much and causes such problems when
All
there
right.
isn't a problem if you just do what you love.
I love it. Yeah, we should all be doing that. I agree that there's a ripple effect. We talk about that a lot, right, Virginia? Where
Hmm.
you start with the man, or right, the woman in the mirror, and you just, yeah, be true to your authentic self, but also maybe invest a little time in pondering what your calling or your ministry or your purpose is, right? But then it automatically contributes to the collective. So yes, I agree with. I love your approach. Just live it. Don't You don't always have to pick it apart. But that's, this is a podcast, so I do want to follow something you just said. I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but it led me down the path of that initial. Oh, you said Joseph Campbell. You didn't fully understand it in the moment, but it did have an impact on you. And it brought me to your Sistine Chapel epiphany. And I had my
Yes.
own. I had my own that I'll probably be telling. Just a heads up, I'll probably tell you the
Okay,
story myself.
great.
But yeah, what exactly was that for you, out of curiosity? And I want to talk about the idea of muses as well. These right, kindred spirits that stay with you throughout your lives. Could you expand on that Sistine Chapel moment a little bit?
Oh, it's just, I mean, I was 19, so I was over in Italy taking college classes for the summer. And one weekend we got to go to the Sistine ceiling. So I walked in with thousands of people as always, and you just
Hmm.
have to move slowly through,
Hmm.
and I just when I first entered, I this energy just like I just became delirious. It's like
Hmm.
the energy just overcame me, and I tried to keep pace with walking with the slow pace we
Hmm.
were all have to do. Like we're pushed through, not pushed through fast, but slow. And I just started. It was just I was in the ozone. It was just such powerful
Hmm.
energy, and I kept looking up, going, "What is this? I mean, what
Hmm.
is happening to me?" And I remember looking and trying to watch my steps, and the guy in front of me was, had the plaid shorts and the big camera and was trying to
Right,
take
right.
pictures. And
Sandals.
I remember like, oh my gosh, would you just look at the ceiling? Aren't you taking it in?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like passing judgment on this guy in front of me and then snapping out of that and going, wait a minute, stay in this energy of
I
what
was going to
you're
say, if
feeling.
you were thinking that or feeling that in 19, imagine now, right?
Yeah.
There are people falling off of cliffs to get that selfie now, instead of just being in the moment, right? Got to get
Oh,
that selfie.
I know. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why I'm so blessed, that I didn't have the internet for so many years of my life. I do. That's a whole nother topic, isn't
Yeah.
it? But
Well, we have a foundation of actual real life. How about that?
yeah, real life connection, so
Yeah.
basically that was it. When it was done, when I actually got through, I was like, oh my gosh. And then I just my life had changed. I just
Mm-hmm.
felt, because I didn't know that I was going to be an artist major at that time. I didn't feel like I was one of the top artists in my high school class. I was one of the top five, but I wasn't like one of the top two.
Right.
And I didn't feel like it was going to be my thing. And then, oh my gosh, when it was, it just, but then I went back to the college, changed my college,
Mm.
because I was very serious, and I went to Washington U, which is one of the top 10 colleges in St. Louis. And at my sophomore year, a professor there said, you need to not be an artist, you're not creative, and
Oh,
you're gonna starve. Like, we don't want
no.
you to starve like the 27,000 starving artists in New York City alone. And I mean, with tears in my eyes, off in the corner, he didn't see him. I was like, I came back, I was like, is creativity something that you can learn, or do you just have to be born with it? And he said, you just have to be born with it. And I'm sorry.
What?
I know
What,
that's
do you
what he
think he
said.
was playing the
Wow.
devil's advocate to
Well,
make you dig your heels in
later on,
more?
yeah, later on, I found out that he was, he's this powerful, incredible professor artist. I mean, he wasn't
Mm.
the greatest professor in my opinion, but he was the great artist, powerful artist, and here he had to be a professor. So he was trying to weed out people that he didn't feel had
Mm-hmm.
it. And, I just thought, but in that moment, I thought, you just have no idea who's inside me.
Right.
Michelangelo and Da Vinci
Right.
are in me because, after Michelangelo, I had gone to France and I sat in front of Da Vinci's at the Uffizi Gallery and the Adoration of the Magi. And, I had just been introduced to these things. I really didn't know that much about them. I mean, everybody knows these names, but I was by myself at the Uffizi Gallery. I sat in front of the Adoration of the Magi, which is an incomplete work, which I had no idea that it was incomplete.
Mm.
And I just sat there. Once again, I couldn't get up for an hour or over an hour. I could not leave that painting.
Mm.
The energy was so powerful. And then Botticelli, and
Mm.
just like this energy just like
It's
filled me. And so when the professor insulted me, I just, there's a part of me that's like, oh my God, because I'd been putting myself down so bad all the time
mm,
anyway, so that I
mm,
had this little voice on one side hearing him putting me, saying I wasn't good enough. And then Michelangelo is saying, you are good enough
love
on
it.
the other side, or Da Vinci. And it was a battle for so many years, but I was a workaholic, just like work, 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 and then my skill got incredibly good. But then I went, wait, they're like, look at what, I won't go into the details of what I'd achieved, but, I was insulted for my ability to draw the figure. And then I got into the master's program because of my skill for drawing the figure. I mean, that's how hard I
Right.
worked.
Wow.
And but I looked at my art and I said, wow, I really have achieved technical skill here, but it's not speaking to me.
Mm.
It's not speaking like Michelangelo and Da Vinci speak, like the expansion that they were connected with, the soul expansion, the energy that came off of their work. That's what I want, at least a little tiny bit, from my
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And it's not technical, but you have to reach the technical
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have the no limitation with your
Right.
voice,
Right. Yeah.
So,
To execute whatever your vision is or your concept
right.
is, you don't want to hit a wall with technique. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm in love with Michelangelo and Da Vinci, and I'm not able to have the skills, it's like, where do you go from there? You're just going
Right.
to keep battling. But anyway, so that's when I moved to Sedona.
Mm.
Sedona, Arizona, and the energy there. I didn't know that the spiritual energy was so powerful. I just was one of those magical moments. I won't go into the story of how I ended up there, but I just moved there like a boo, like, what am I doing? What am I doing moving here? Oh,
Wow.
now I see. It's a vortex. I didn't have any idea about any of it. And
That's all
that's
I've
when,
ever heard about Sedona. It's like
oh
Santa
my
Fe, but
Mm-hmm.
more
gosh.
powerful. Yeah. It's.
Yes, and I lived there for 2.5 years. It changed my life, and that's when my art began. The spiritual art
Mm.
began, so it's been quite a wonderful journey.
Wow. Yeah. There's so much there, but I, I don't like to hear, those sort of bitter. It's usually an instructor, let's be honest. Like in
Yeah.
my high school, there was a failed Broadway, the acting coach that did all the and it's a long story. We had a real theater with the catwalk, and even LA Philharmonic would rent our high school auditorium because it was a real theater space with, again, catwalks and all the lights. And so we were kind of spoiled. We had access. The first time Grease was done off Broadway, we had the sets, the choreographers, the vocal coaches. So being next door to Hollywood, there was some serious like stage parenting going on as well. So everything came together. But yeah, unfortunately, we had a pretty bitter failed performer from Broadway, and he did similar things, I guess, trying to weed out the people that couldn't cut the mustard in his view. But in a way, just spiritually, do you ever get to the point where you actually see in an unexamined way they're playing the devil's advocate in a way, and ultimately can be seen as an angel, not an adversary, because they make you more convicting, right? You dug your heels
Right.
in and said, no, 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 I'm not listening to you. I'm listening to Michelangelo.
Right. And that's later on, I understood what a blessing it was. And
Hmm.
later on, I would ask my students, if somebody insulted you, what would you do? And, some would say, oh my gosh, I'd tell them off. And some would say, oh, I'd totally be quiet and buckle and I would never be an artist. I mean, so I said, that tells you how strong, like you just said, how
Yeah.
strong your conviction is. And I had been putting myself down so much that's why he was allowed to get
Yeah.
into my
Yeah, but you
spirit,
fought harder ultimately. So that's everybody's different. But I
Yeah.
know I became in spite of limitations, in spite of
Right.
the voices of doubt, in spite of the haters, as they say. And so everybody's different. And I think it's unexamined on their part. So I'm not letting anyone off the hook. I think they go about it in the wrong way. But yeah,
Yeah.
sometimes they can be seen as agents in your growth or, you
Yes.
know, uh, angels. Uh,
Yes. I
anyway.
agree.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
don't you feel like sometimes though when that happens, because I know I've, obviously come across that myself in the writing world, that
Mm,
I feel like it makes me kind of introspectively take a step back and go, is this my drive? Is this my purpose? And if
mhm,
it is, I think that's when I feel like I dig my heels in more
mhm.
versus, kind of like what you just said, Joan, where when you've talked to your students, where they're like, oh, I just grew up on a ball and probably not, be an artist at this point. Like, so how dedicated are you really?
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It-
Well, I taught for 20 years at Art Center. That's Greg was my instructor at Art Center, and
oh,
and
wow.
years later, I taught there for I founded their entertainment track, then I taught there for 20 years. And frankly,
Awesome.
Virginia, I would never take on the responsibility of
Hmm.
discouraging anyone. Never.
Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
agree.
So I just not how I roll. It's not in my blood. But I do
Mm-hmm.
think you can lead a horse. I mean, I've learned obviously over
Hmm.
20 years of teaching, and I do keep in touch with students and I see where they land and what role
Mm-hmm.
art plays in their life. We're not all
Mm-hmm.
meant to necessarily, right, have it be our vocation. It can be our avocation. And so it is interesting to watch people's artistic, chemin artistique, their little artistic journey, and what art ends up serving in their lives. So I do know if it's meant to be, it will happen. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So I
Yeah.
have a nephew who I created opportunities for, and I did spend much of my life writing letters of recommendation and literally getting interviews for people and going out on a limb and heartfelt recommendations. And but the bottom line is, if it's meant to be, it will happen. And it could be the drive, the passion, like you had, Joan. Who knows? There's so many ingredients. But
well,
I like the
I
idea
used
that it can serve different, it can serve everybody differently.
I mean,
Hmm.
I used to ask my students, what is the most important thing that you need for whatever it is your drive is? If it's, and I said artist since I was teaching artists, but, what is the most important characteristic you need? And they listed, creativity, skill, list all kinds of things. I
Mm,
said, the number one thing is drive. I mean, because
mhm,
how
mhm.
many students, I was one of the few in my class in Washington U that continued to be a professional artist full time.
Right, right.
And, and same with students. I had some incredibly skilled students who had no, like you just said, no desire to be. And that's okay, but
Mhm.
just understand that drive is the number one thing to succeed,
Right. And maybe everybody's on a different journey. So the milestones can be universal, but they're in different order, right? We all learn things in
Hmm.
a different order. But this podcast, we tend to focus on, that moment when you do connect your craft. And we've talked a lot about technique, right? Having that technique to back up your vision, whether that's conceptual, right? Or just narrative, whatever you're y- feeling driven to express. So technique is just one part of that equation. But I kind of like this magical moment, like you, Joan, where you connect it with what you have to offer, right? What your unique soul, what combination of traits is unique to you that you're being called upon by the universe to contribute back to the collective. Sorry if that
Mhm.
sounds lofty, but I
No,
think,
it's perfect.
there might be somebody out there like garage bands. They never really learn technique. They might just pick up an instrument and never take a lesson, but you know what? That's exactly what they're meant. Like that rawness is exactly what's needed.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's more about purpose than it is
Hmm.
really any one ingredient like technique or but I agree, drive, right? Drive and the muses are a part of that. I have my own muses that I feel I'm kindred spirits with, even if there's decades or centuries separating us. And that's what keeps me going a lot of times, feeling that kinship with people that are called upon in the same way that I've been called upon. How do Michelangelo and who's the other guy that visits you?
Da Vinci,
Right, right.
Leonardo da
Oh, just Da
Vinci.
Vinci. Yeah, just him.
So full of wonder and exploration.
Well, I think
But I want to kind of touch on. I'm sorry if but the word success. I said in
Mhm.
order to succeed,
Mm.
we all have whatever success is for us, and if doing a Sunday artist or a few hours a month artist is what helps you feel good and find joy and peace, then that's success for you.
Beautiful.
There's not. I didn't want
It's
to
no, no, I love that.
yeah.
That's how I took it when you said it,
Okay.
meaning, being a professional artist is definitely overrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but
Yeah.
that shouldn't be your gauge of whether it's
Right.
whatever that vision is and whatever you've been called to contribute. If you touch
Hmm.
one or two people, right, and I'm more into writing these days, that's where I feel like I've matured the most. It's
Hmm.
definitely not in my figurative or figural painting, although I do enjoy it. I feel like I've matured most as a writer. So do you know what I mean? If one story touches one person in Iceland,
Hmm.
my job is done.
That's beautiful.
Well, I was
Where
gonna
I'm
say, I
at.
think you guys both touched on it perfectly too. When you talk about the energy and the connectivity and feeling like you've, basically come to that universal feeling of understanding, of what you're seeing or what you're putting out too. I mean, to me, I think that's what makes art so amazing. It's, as the artist creating, you're tapping into that universal connection of the
Mm,
human experience,
mhm.
and then the person who's viewing it is receiving that energy and tapping into it to perceive it.
Yeah, it's like a full circle, right?
Beautiful.
That's when the
Yes.
circuit's completed, is when the patron, but we're not always there to feel that or experience the completion of the circuit. That's why I love live theater, because you actually feel the energetic exchange.
Mm.
But you have faith, right, that the patron, well, you probably get a lot of satisfaction because you work directly with your patrons on the, right? You co-create the portraits together.
Oh, it's a total high. Yes.
Well, we'll get into those in a second. But I think Virginia, you hinted at something that's a good transition here. You seem pretty into the visceral aspect. That's my word. Like if intellect is overrated and we're talking this thing into the ground, I agree. It's experiential in a lot of ways, right? Your process is just that. It's a process that's serving you, but we don't always, there's all kinds of art out there. There's conceptual, there's narrative, right? There's process art, there's, yeah, experiential. So I really thought the music paintings were largely about the visceral level. And just as a way into this topic, I'll say as a filmmaker, my favorite part of the process is working with the composer. And because it is nonlinear, right? And it's nothing that can really be bottled. And I'll use just one silly example. I did know on one of my films that I wanted, my favorite films are those in which they're actually very light on dialogue, and it's the texture and the ambiance, right, and the imagery and the way it transports you, and truly almost like theater dell'arte. It's the facial expressions and the gestures that touch you despite language. That's right, Virginia. That's the name of our podcast, Language of the Soul. But there is a whole nother visceral level, and those are the films I like best. So I had this approach on this one film, and I thought, well, I kind of want to get him in the gut first. And I do love films where you're reacting and you don't know why. They're despicable characters, even, but you don't know why. There's something in their humanity that you relate to and you're invested in. And then you're moved despite yourself. And usually I walk away going, well, I guess I was moved because I'm human. Right? There's something about loss, films about loss, for example. You can't pinpoint it, but your humanity is the very reason you're moved. Anyway, so that sounds pretty lofty, but my goal was let's get them in the gut first. Then maybe not. Maybe 2 days later, I love films that sit with you for a while, right? But maybe you feel it in the gut. And then if there's a takeaway, that's intellectual, it's kind of delayed. It's a little bit later. So I was thinking about that the whole time. I even wrote up art direction, paragraphs. And my composer, without communicating that to him, it was so magic. He would have the deep cello vibrating in your gut, and at just the right moment, and then it would break. And you'd hear these ethereal strings that literally vibrated in your sinus cavities. So he followed
Mm.
my approach without even communicating it to him. Anyway, and I feel like your music paintings might be experiential, if that makes sense. How did those
Mhm.
come about? And is there anything that you can put your thumb on, or was it a completely nonlinear, if that makes sense, visceral experience for you?
Well, I have to just say in response to what you were just sharing about what you're creating is that experience of all the levels of being human,
Mm,
along with the incredible soul, that
mm,
expands, so that even just the title of this podcast is such a beautiful combination of, appreciating and loving human
mm,
experience along with, the expansion of soul, because soul is
mm,
all there is. But we are so blessed to be human. So
mm,
to experience all this. And so I don't know, the abstracts for me, I was writing my book and I was just dedicated and focusing on that. So I wasn't able to do my art for a while. And I found, like, my daughter, when she was 7, she goes, "Mommy, when you don't do your art, you're not happy."
you, you needed her to tell you that. I love
And I
that.
was like, "Boy, are you insightful." Like, that's so true. And so anyway, I had to do some art while I was writing the book, because but I couldn't get back to these ethereal drawings that took so very tedious, very time consuming, like I was so passionate about one at a time, which took a long time, and I couldn't start one of those while I was writing a book. So I went to the studio and just threw some paint around, just because I needed to
Mm,
just be a kid and play and just, get my hand in some paint. And
mhm,
I just did it, and I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool.
mhm,
And then I was playing music, because I love music.
mhm, mhm.
And I all of a sudden, this painting that I did, it was like, my gosh, I just captured the essence of this song.
Wow, beautiful. Oh, you didn't
Because
even consciously notice.
no, it was "Morning is Broken" by Cat
Oh, I love that.
Stevens.
Oh, he's one of my favorite.
And I found myself grabbing, I said, "Oh, I want a new canvas." And it was kind of big. I mean, I just had access. By then I had just kind of accumulated stuff and I mean, materials. And I just picked the colors intuitively, and I just
Mm.
played the song over and over. And because I loved it, not
Oh
because
my
I
God,
thought
I
I was,
love Cat
not because,
Stevens.
yeah, I know, not because I thought I was going to paint it. But when I was
Mhm.
done, I was like, my gosh, look what I have done.
Mm,
So then
mhm.
I consciously started putting it out there that I can capture your song, because I thought it would be a real expansion for me, because that was something I related to, as those songs, like that connected to my energy. But if you pick a song that I'm like, oh gosh, I don't even like that song, but I'm committed to doing it because you want me, because I've put that out there that I will do that, and it would stretch me to see if I
Mm,
could,
mhm.
connect to the energy of a song that I wasn't like all high about.
Right.
And I did it, like every customer I had or collector I had, they were like, "Whoa, this is really cool. It looks just like I feel it." And it was a real expansion, for freedom. I mean, talk about life expansion, because
Mm.
here I'd been doing these tedious, drawings, and they were feeling soulful, but I wasn't. But this freedom
I was
of
gonna say
making,
it sounds very freeing.
oh
I've said, if
gosh.
somebody came along tomorrow, and I'm very trained. I took my first oil painting class at 7, and I know the atelier approach, and I
Oh
can
wow.
lay or old masters approach versus the alla prima. I spent my whole life doing that, and but you know what? Every time I do a painting that's like in the old masters technique, I get halfway through, I'm like, and why am I doing this again?
Yeah.
It is not fun. I mean, there's something meditative about, right, being
Yeah.
methodical. You do
Yeah.
lose yourself. You get your meditation in. You get those
Mhm.
gamma waves flowing, I guess. But it is tedious, and
Mhm.
I just end up going tearing my hair out. Like, and why am I doing this? So I've joked, like, if somebody came along tomorrow and said, "I want to put you up. I'll take a percentage of your first show. You're now a fine artist. Go." I would. It would be completely abstract. I don't want to pull out my bag of tricks, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have no pride, nothing to prove, like I probably would do 100% abstract.
Well, it built my trust in life. because I built so much trust in my skills because, you take so many classes, read so many books, and consume so much information. And I was not focused on being an abstract artist. So I didn't know that I had retained. And I went to grab like a certain material or tip or dip or throw or do whatever. And I was like, where did that idea come from? Like, how did I even think to grab that tool or do it? Look, but then I went, oh my gosh, I read about that or saw that or stood there one-on-one and looked at a painting, in the museum. All this, you retain all this. So it gives you so much trust in the magic of life and the retention of life. And, just like in your daily life, you start trusting how things flow. And I don't know, there's just it was wonderful.
It's beautiful. It's almost like the sum is greater than the whole of its parts, like it all comes into play in some unexamined ways. I do have a question though. Do you still do the music paintings, or is that a thing of the past?
And that is a thing of the past, but
did you ever I'm guessing all the time. Did your patrons ever say, "Oh, that is the perfect embodiment of what I experience when I hear that song"?
Well, they said they loved it. They bought it,
Well, no, but I just wonder
because I did have kind of an agreement. If you don't connect or relate, like I don't want this pressure. I don't want this pressure. Although galleries don't like that, but so I worked on my own more. But
so you get a refund if you're completely off.
Yeah, they say no. You sign a commission. You're committed. You have to pay. And I was like, I don't want that pressure on me. I want freedom to just do, and if you like it, get it. But
well, the reason I ask is again, quick story. I had some former students that didn't really land, right away at a studio. Their goals happened to have been, working in the entertainment industry, and they just didn't land. So they started meeting, which I thought was beautiful, and just creating. They say, don't wait around to be loved, just keep creating. So it was actually the funnest thing I've ever done for on a volunteer basis. And we would just meet and slowly try to develop concepts that nobody had ownership in. But it was really just, exercising, keeping those muscles primed, And one of the things we did is just turn on a piece of music, and it was usually non-lyrical. And we all would just sort of tune in and I guess tune out, right?
Yeah.
tune in and zone out.
Totally.
And just start sketching what came to mind.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating how we all would gravitate toward the same themes in our little doodles. And then we actually would write a paragraph of any narrative that occurred in your mind's eye. Always variations on a theme, because we're in the same room and literally it's vibrational at that point.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So yeah, I just kind of wondered if, you received the same, vision that or maybe sometimes people don't know it till they see it, right? I feel like maybe non-artists don't sometimes know until they see it.
Yeah, I don't think that I don't feel like they had a vision ahead of time because they weren't artists. But I mean, not that they don't have a vision if you're not an artist. I don't know.
It's more the feeling though, right? Every song takes you on a journey and there's a feeling attached to it. Anyway, so how did the personal portraits, it seems like a sort of an extension of the music paintings. In a way, you're capturing their favorite song, which I think aesthetics are largely soul related, if that makes sense. Like that is your unique thumbprint in a way, is your sense of aesthetics. So it seems like it evolved into this beautiful idea. And I want to talk a lot about the personal power portraits, because I do think that when we surround ourselves with reminders of our core essence, reminders of our essential selves, it's empowering. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but that's my understanding of these personal power portraits. I know my space is very important to me. I don't like clutter. I've never explored feng shui. I don't know anything about it, but I know I love to feel tranquil and at peace by virtue of this space, right? What I'm surrounded by. So I can't imagine having a reminder of my essential self, my soul, as a constant reminder. Can you tell us a little bit more about how those evolved, those personal power portraits, and how you interact with the client? What kind of conversations go into that?
Well, to start with, like so many, I was plagued with putting myself down all the time. You're not good enough because, I look at my work and say, well, it's not Michelangelo or Da Vinci. I was always comparing. Anyway, I was just always putting myself down. So I'm always seeking. And I realized that spiritual growth is the only way to reach love of self. So I had to get, because I, working so hard to make it as an artist, in the business of art, trying to understand how to run the business of art, and but just all that conflict, how do you run the business, and I'm not good enough to do that, and all that voice. And so I don't know, there was many other stages that happened in there, because I went from abstracts to combining animals with abstracts. And then I started doing fantasy, because I love fantasy, like dragons, unicorns, and I was pulled to go to Comic-Con. And I did a Comic-Con show, and it was very, I was very popular there, and I thought that was my key. And in the meantime, I had signed up for a class, Jim Fortin. Have you ever heard of Jim Fortin?
I have. Yeah.
Fortin.
Oh, maybe on your website. Yeah.
Read about him. Yes.
Yeah.
So
well, no,
I had
the name is in my brain already, but then I did read
Yeah.
about him on your website a little bit.
Well,
tell
he
me
has a
about him.
wonderful podcast, Jim Fortin podcast. And I had signed up for his class, and just to spiritually grow, because I knew that the conflict I was experiencing could only be solved through the soul, through the spiritual growth. And he was into, subliminal, shifting your inner voice, that subliminal, that the subconscious. And so I'd signed up for the class, and anyway, to make a long story short, after going through his class, I made these realizations about my identity and my values. And I mean, I just cried. It was just a release of this is who I really, the clarification of who I know I am inside, my identity, really getting in touch with my values, and then living them. And so I wanted to do a thank you. I wanted to give him one of my abstracts as a thank you, for having such a wonderful, because I signed up for his class called TCP, and that's the class I had taken. And
can you tell us what that acronym stands for?
Oh gosh, transformational. It's shifting your subconscious. Oh my gosh,
Okay, don't worry. No pressure. We'll Google it.
Jim Fortin, TCP. It'll come up everywhere. He's got a huge podcast. He's popular. But his class is awesome. And then there's another inner circle that follows that. His brother-in-law is a shaman. Like, his sister is married to a real shaman that was a shaman from age 6 years old, born into the family. I mean, a real shaman that was buried in the desert, neck down for days, when he was 9 years old, all that. Oh my God. So the powers that this shaman has, and he's just, so Jim speaks for him, because real shamans don't get on the internet and share talk,
right.
Not real shamans, So he is the shaman's voice, and he passes all this wisdom, this this ancient wisdom that is just so profound, and it rang so true, so deep, and it was such release to finally connect to letting go of, I want to be successful, and all this kind of ego stuff, not kind of, but total ego stuff, like, what is success? Is it a certain amount of money? Is it a certain level? It's none of that, so, like, getting that clarification and simplifying the direction of my life was so profound. So I wanted to give him a thank you. And I had many abstracts in my studio that I was just going to send him. And he said, I love the generosity, but it's really just not my style. And and so I was like, oh gosh, I just feel like I've got to do art for him. So he had mentioned the double-headed eagle in one of his talks, and he just mentioned it. And it just it just got, it stuck with me. So I found myself one day just like being, just like whoosh, like those artist moments that you're just like, oh, thank you, God. I was totally inspired to do this huge, it was 5 foot wide, and double-headed eagle with all the symbols and things that I had felt inspired from and connected with him for him. And I sent it to him as a gift. And because it was done with such purity and gift, and no money involved, and no, nothing, it was such a pure energy place that when I was done with it, I was like, oh my gosh, I have captured his higher self, because the double-headed eagle is a leader, and there's so many other symbols in there that represent things that, that are him. And he was so blown away by it.
Wow.
And he said, "Do you realize how powerful you are?" And I was like, well, there's this power that's been just like the pounding in my heart. I mean, I still remember so many, I mean, almost every day I just had this hyper power energy just driving me forward all the time. But this conflict of I'm not good enough and what's a success, and trying so hard, to stop it. And so, like, I felt like I had this powerful, you know, message that was in me, that was our purpose, or whatever you define it, my dharma was in me, getting me there. And so I was like, you're wow, like that, this is it, so then I started offering that for people. That's when I defined, oh my gosh, my two passions are to study spirituality and the higher self, what it is, and art, creating creative art. So when I interview now I interview the person for 90 minutes, and I ask them a whole series of questions, and I connect to their energy, and I record it, and then I meditate. After the recording, I play the recording again, but I relax and meditate, and I just feel the energy of pulling it all together. Like, one of the first questions I ask, which seems to be popular these days, and but how many people really ask themselves, if you had 2 weeks to live, and you had all the money and perfect health that you needed, what would you do for those 2 weeks? And it's amazing how many, as popular as that is now in songs and everything, people don't really stop and really ask themselves seriously, because I can't remember one person who wasn't like, oh, what
Right.
would I do?
Well, there's the bucket list idea. That's pretty
yeah.
popular, right?
Yeah, but that's not a 2-week thing,
Right,
like, you
right,
can't do your bucket list in 2 weeks,
right.
so
And
which one?
that's almost like, what meal would you like before we execute you?
Oh gosh.
Lasagna? No, anyway, so that's the first question you ask.
That's one. And then I ask them a bunch of other things that they're like, wow, it gets them thinking, like what turned you on as a child, and what turns you on as an adult. And it's just, what is your sky, what turned you on in the sky, and what is your favorite, just all these questions, and it just pulling it all together, they get high. I mean,
Of course, yeah.
95% of the time they're like, wow, this is like a therapy session. This is like, I feel like I understand myself more. I'm excited. This is, I think I'm pretty cool now,
Right,
they're in touch with themselves again, because they've lost it, because everybody gets so busy with their 9 to 5 world that, you just lose touch. And so that's basically
beautiful.
what I do.
Yeah, it's beautiful because you're offering more than just the painting, right? You're offering spiritual growth, maybe not an epiphany, but that's as it should be. The patron, right? You get something out of it, and they get something out of it.
Yeah, and power animals and spirit animals, of course, is a huge thing. Like
Of
many
course. Well,
times with their,
that's one
many
of the
times.
questions I had. Sorry to interrupt you. One of the questions I had was, and sorry for my ignorance, but the double-headed eagle, is that from a specific tradition, or did he mention it as kind of a metaphor in his talk? What was the
I don't
context surrounding
remember
that?
when, because it was just mentioned,
Mhm.
and then later on he said, it's interesting how nobody asked me about that.
Right, right.
It's
Well,
kind
I
of like
will.
you kind of.
That's funny. Well, it probably landed enough as a metaphor, or however he was using it. So, but I will say, the closest experience I have a friend Dave that's kind of doing similar work, although maybe not to the extent. He's a pretty cool dude, and he's pretty spiritual. So he does talk a lot with his clients when doing a portrait, and of course he tries to capture them in some way. But he probably would express it very differently than the way you have. But I would say, the therapeutic function of that exchange you have with your patrons. Some of us have been in therapy or are in therapy, and that definitely serves its purpose, but there's something different when it's got a spiritual slant to it. So there's a little place in my neighborhood called the Philosophical Research Center on Los Feliz. Do you know that, Virginia, by chance?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's awesome. I go there just to look in the bookstore, and there's events from time to time. So I just popped my head into an intuition workshop. And yeah, one of those days where you're just following synchronicity, right? You happen to be free enough to do that, and the universe just kind of reveals itself. I feel like when you're not on the clock, right, and you're not on a schedule, that's when you notice the synchronicities, and you just ride the wave. So I went in there,
Mhm.
and it was just one of those days. And yeah, they had us, hook up with a partner that you didn't even know, and it's pretty intimate, and I don't remember a whole lot, but you kind of try to picture the other person as an animal, right? Somebody you just met. And I was told I'm a lion.
Mm-hmm.
But I just, every time I go to Kabbalah, you know what I mean? Or even just a little workshop like that, it serves you in a very different way than therapy. And maybe that speaks to what we were saying earlier, like words are overrated. And just the experiential level or the visceral level can be more cathartic than, I don't know, hashing out the intellectual side of things.
Yeah, overthinking kills you.
All right. Well,
My
I think, sorry, we're human. And so I think our egos serve a purpose for survival. But yeah, definitely overrated. Sorry, Virginia, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, it just reminds me of how powerful it is for us to see ourselves through those different lenses.
Mm,
It's kind of like, I know Nick and I have talked before. Like when I used to teach my beginning writers class, I'd always tell the writers in day one in class is they need to go home before the next class, and throughout that week, constantly look in the mirror and really take a hard look and like stare into their eyes and see what
mhm,
gets reflected back, because that the reflection that we see through those different lenses can be so transformative
mm.
into understanding our deeper selves. And I think we don't take the time to do that because we're just, like you were saying, Joan, we're just in that 9 to 5 kind of getting things done, that we don't, people don't stop and ask themselves those philosophical questions anymore.
Well, and I think they need permission to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
So, like going to that workshop, it gave people
Mhm.
permission to do that. Or, taking the step to have a portrait done and meeting with you, it's permission.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
yeah.
To experience the energy, if you do that in a workshop, or if you do it like with the one-on-one with the portrait, it's you experience the energy, and then you start craving more. Like that's a higher, that I feel a different higher energy there. I mean, if you want to call it, it is higher, expansive energy,
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that it
yes.
just fills a need. And that's the kind of energy that, like really getting in touch with how we all are one is,
Mm,
and like you said, the ego serves a purpose, but we have to jump past that to expand, to this oneness. And to get to that place is just starts with loving yourself,
mm,
so that you can start looking in the other person's eyes without judgment. Because if you're still judging yourself so harsh, you're looking at them with judgment instead of seeing them as a reflection of you, like you.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean you stop judgment, because I think as long as you're human, you're going to judge. But you
discern.
have
I
a.
like the word discernment. Yeah.
There you go.
You're allowed to diagnose and discern.
There you go.
But no, I get you 100%. I mean, I think the only answer, you were hinting at, again, my words, but inner peace, tranquility, well being, it's
Mm.
always available, right? And those
Yeah.
of us who meditate know it might take a while, but you can
Yeah.
get there and limit the mental chatter. And in the midst of chaos, that inner peace is there. But how many of us take the time to do that, then go out into the world? And the rest is the ripple effect. So we're not going to like change the world overnight or create inner peace, but I promise, right? Each of us doing our inner work, that's the answer on the macro scale, So if we
Mm-hmm.
can all, because the humanity is part of, seeing, it's all sounds so corny, right? But if you go about your day seeing through the eyes of love because you've taken the time to align and center, you're going to see somebody holding the door open at Starbucks instead of the, asshole honking in the parking lot.
Exactly. There you go.
So,
There you go. I mean, it's all about redirecting that chatter inside. And it's, that's Jim Fortin helps a lot with all the
mm,
different ways you can go about it. I mean, there's so many ways of shifting, and, and it's very simple. It can be very simple throughout the day I mean, because like the shaman says, meditation is 24 hours a day. Well, how do
mhm,
you do that? Well, you're obviously sitting and meditating all day, but you're shifting
right.
your vision, your thoughts. You're paying more attention to what you're actually thinking, and
Yeah.
shifting that to another, whatever. If it's just as simple as, oh, I'll just be grateful or thankful instead of whatever, putting whatever
Well, when you,
negative thing.
if you, but I guess for me, the answer would be having a practice and prioritizing that
Hmm.
practice. Because yes, the more you meditate, the more you're centered as you go about your day. It has a kind of cumulative effect. We
Yes.
still go in and out of alignment, But tell me if you feel similarly. I have this premise that artists or anyone, we're all creative. I would say that it's to be human is to be creative. Some of us have not yet found a way to, I don't know, connect that with a sense of purpose or to contribute it back to the collective. But we're all being creative in our own ways all day, every day. But I think
Mm-hmm.
people with a discipline or a craft actually have the gift of those gamma waves. So when you're in the middle of a painting and you're in the zone, as they say, there is no mental chatter, right? You're
Right.
connected with your divinity. And
Totally.
so the creative process, that's why your daughter says, Mom, from the mouths of babes, right?
Yep.
Mom, you're happier when you create. But
Exactly.
it's that simple. I think if we found an outlet for creativity or self-expressed on a regular basis, we probably would get in the zone at some point in our creative process, and it does have cumulative effects. I know I plein air paint a lot, and there is no linear thought when you're, you know what I mean, kind of looking back and forth and interpreting those colors in
Yeah.
nature. You're
Beautiful.
just in the zone. And I was so lucky to have a mentor. Speaking of our muses and mentors, on Lion King, my first film, I just adored. It was great
Oh,
to have a
wow.
boss that you worship. It's never happened again,
Wow.
trust me.
Wow.
But I was 21, straight out of school, and I adored
Yeah.
my boss. And to this day, he's kind of just an example to me of a gentleman, right, and a spiritual being. Anyway, like Greg, had a huge influence on me. But I
Mm.
promise you, and he was a Zen Buddhist at the time, as evidenced by his little tail. He didn't talk about it, right? He didn't talk about it at work. But anyway, you just knew like so much time on the right half of his brain that all day, every day, he was just complete, like you just chilled in his presence because he was there, if that makes sense. Yeah, so we all should all aspire to be a Doug Ball. There's a shout out. Doug Ball. Now he's in
That's,
Hawaii, actually, just painting, doing gallery paintings. He sells in
mm.
Tahiti and Hawaii, and that's the life I want. Good
Well, I've also
priorities.
gained a bigger appreciation and awe about being human, like rather than trying to escape. Because I have to say, when I first moved to Sedona, I think I was with too many circles of people who were trying to, um, raised away from being human, just to be in this exalted spiritual place, because
Mm.
kind of escaping being human. And now it's like to be able to fully embrace the honor of being human
I
in
was going to say, I think we compartmentalize. I'm so sorry if I interrupted you.
no, that's I said
Well,
it.
because it's come up a couple times, this theme of like, is our humanity at odds with our spirituality? I don't
Yeah.
know. More and more, I'm impressed by people like my sister, whom I mentioned in the pre-interview, Renee Marie, who can apply her spiritual principles in the trenches.
Mhm.
Mother Teresa said, I lost my religion, as they say, for 20 years,
Mm. Mhm.
but I still did the work. She literally has said, I saw no evidence of God for 20 years, but
Mm.
I still did the work. So
Mm.
I just, not that there's any right way to go about life, but I tend to respect people who, again, I think maybe that's why I mentioned that ego has its place, because we can't demonize all of our survival instincts. They're here for a reason so that we can have those glimpses of our spirituality and try and live in that space as much as possible, right? But I think it's our humanity. And when I use the word humanity, I am talking about compassion, seeing what we share, seeing the universal. So
Totally.
anyway, I just maybe our humanity is a path to our spirituality, or they're not mutually exclusive. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Well, like Viktor Frankl, I don't know if I have the exact words, but the meaning of life is what you make it. It's and
Mm,
what you make it is following your passions, your skills, your talents. You came into this world with a uniqueness, and when you discover your uniqueness and your individual talents or whatever your values and follow that, that's your meaning, and it's different for
mhm.
everybody,
Yep.
and that's expanding the humanness, but it's also grabbing onto the soul's purpose, because that's your dharma, or like that's then it connects the two, in my opinion.
Well, I think the reason I went into that is you hinted that early on, maybe some of the people in Sedona were escaping their humanity by taking refuge in their spirituality. Anyway, I heard a little something in there. And in my youth, I did write about that a lot. How, when you have your head in the clouds, it's a great way to escape your actual issues. And so I
Hmm.
think we're all on a journey and we're all trying to have our feet on the ground and our head in the clouds at the same time, if that makes sense. I guess I'm also hinting at, the Thomas More idea. We're into Joseph Campbell, but Thomas More, I think, is also a comparative religion expert. And he talks a lot about embracing the shadow, and
Yep.
Jungian psychology talks about embracing the shadow side of humanity. And I mean, Day of the Dead's coming up, right? That's an example of embracing the light and the shadow and the yin and the yang and all of that. So I just do
Totally.
find, under the guise of spirituality, sometimes we want to ignore the shadow side. And we're quick to label things as good, bad, pleasurable, right? Suffering, painful. It's like, how about it just is?
I know, I know. And I think that's why the hero's journey helped me when I
Mm,
was trying to define, like, when you go through the shadow moments or those really dark moments of life and you can't make sense of it, like suddenly the hero's journey, like, whoa,
mm.
this is part of the journey. Like, yes,
You
I'll
want,
get through this. Yay.
right?
There's exciting, chapter to come, and
Yeah,
you
because
focus.
you understand the cycles, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you understand it is a cycle. And then you can, like the world right now. I mean, we're about
Yeah.
to enter a pretty challenging time. And if we can just like know that I mean, the more spiritually connected we can be,
Mm.
the more we're going to just glide through this and help this be the most wonderful growth spurt,
I would say
challenging time.
that's exactly what we're being called upon to do, right?
I know it's
Oh,
exciting to me that we're here
good
because
for you.
obviously we chose. Well, I mean, I mean, yeah, I think because I've gone through enough of those downsides,
Mm,
those dark sides of moments where I've come through, and it's like, gosh, I don't, it just feels so good to be able to get through those with
faith.
fully being able to cry and accept and
Mm,
release and talk and be in those moments, fully experience them, but then let it pass and then just embrace it. And once again, about embrace being human, and the change that's inevitable with life. I mean, what do they say? The
mm,
world, if the humans weren't here, the earth would be doing these crazy things on its own,
right.
so we as humans need to just kind of go start flowing and adding, helping. And it's just an exciting time for us to be to be what we came here to be.
Yep. Well, I do think it takes, I used the word faith a moment ago, just because to recognize that, yeah, all strife signals change. And in the beginning of my book that became this podcast, I talk about the year I was born, which is 1968. And yeah, the
Mm.
world was on fire, just like right now, right?
Yeah.
So many, all the assassinations that happened that year and the Democratic
Yeah.
National Convention and just so many low points like in police brutality and the civil rights
Hmm.
movement. And but also, I'm not even going to say high points, just pretty much low points.
Yeah.
But you
Hmm.
saw people's passion. And then
Yeah.
69, you had Woodstock, right? The quintessence of
Hmm.
our interconnectivity. You saw
Hmm.
the moon landing, which has been framed as, right, our capacity and potential, our human capacity. So that to me is like a back to back example of, yeah, strife signals change on the horizon. But I don't know. I think it takes faith because I think the stakes feel higher right now. Again, you have been around a little longer. Do the stakes seem higher right now? I don't know, like the end of democracy or maybe fascism on the horizon, or is this one of many, many changes you've seen? I
I think
assumed we were talking about the divisiveness and the, I don't know, upcoming election.
yeah. I mean, it's choice. I mean, I don't want to choose to believe it's the worst or whatever, because then you just get all tense and analyzing and, fearful and all those words.
Catastrophizing, yeah.
Yeah, but facing what is there and being prepared. I'm kind of excited about. I was just going to sign up for this. Greg Braden has a class called A 5-Year Guide to Your Future: Discoveries That Will Supercharge the Way You Think, Heal, Love, and Live.
Mm,
And it's an 8-week master class. He's just kind of listing. I mean, I haven't signed up for it. It hasn't started. I don't know what it starts the minute you pay or whatever, but it's like only $29 a month or $299 for a year to be, to catch you up on what's going on and how it can be solved, and to approach it in a really positive way. So I feel like I need a little guidance, so I'm kind of looking to this as to help me shift my, because I tend to be in la la land, like I
Good
don't
for you.
understand and so I just can't, but I don't want to be in la la land. I want to be
It's a
aware.
balance. It's a balance for
Yeah, I
everybody.
want
How
to be
much do
aware
you-
to do what I can do and say what I can say, and even if my art can express and help face, what is really happening, but face it with a real positive. I don't know if
Exactly.
positive is the word, but
No, how do you be the change, like we said earlier? How do you be the
yeah.
change you wish to see in the world without identifying with, right, the talking heads on the news and the doom speaking and the catastrophizing? It is really tough to turn on the TV at all.
Yeah, well, I just don't,
Good for you.
so
Yeah, but
I'm one
being
of those.
informed is what we're
I'm one of
talking
those people who people are all excited to share some negative news with me because I haven't heard it. They're like, "You haven't heard?" And I said, "No, tell me. I know you can't wait to tell me."
That's a very real thing, though. Like, how do you let the real world, and that's in quotes, by the way, right? The big bad world, how much do you let in?
Yeah.
We all know how to be spiritually content, and we're all here for a different reason, right? We're not all going to be activists. We're not all going to buy into socialization and the status quo and all that. Thank God for politicians, or public servants, is the way I'll put it. Thank God for them. Thank God for our military. That ain't me, and that ain't you, Joan.
No.
Right? We're here to do it through our gifts, through our
Right.
but I do think I say amen to all of it. I really do. But we get to choose how much, and it's not even negativity, but how much of the messaging, Virginia, in the spirit of our podcast, right? There's so much messaging from all sides all the time. And that's what you're saying about overthinking things. You turn on the news and you can buy into the fear very quickly. So yeah, I think we're all tasked with like maintaining our center, right? Finding our authentic self and our peace and our well-being, then going out into the world and I'm being really issuing a lot of platitudes here, right? But then going out and being the change we wish to see in the world.
Right.
This is what I aspire to.
Yep.
We all fail every day, right? But I don't know. That's kind of what I see, and that's what you're doing, right? I think you were saying your tendency is to be in la la land, but you want to find a way, right, of acknowledging maybe what's going on in the big bad world, but then making your difference in your own unique, authentic way.
Yeah, listening to the voices you believe. I mean, Jim
Mm.
Fortin, the shaman Don DX that he shares the wisdom from, like he is he's preparing us, for things. So like the wisdom he shares somewhat on the podcast and in the classes, that helps me a lot too, because it's just it's something you believe in, like it's just such a deep, expansive soul connection that is faced in reality, but when the shaman has this ability to shift energy and to shape shift and these things, he has a connection and a communication with the earth that is so profound. And it's just, so you just tune into those people that you just feel like have another connection that you want to expand to, and then it becomes yours.
Yep. Yeah, Virginia, I think you've said on here, be in the world but not of it.
Yeah, to live in the world, live in the world but not be of the world. So to
That's
find
what I meant by
that,
not identifying with.
basically for me it's finding that balance of purpose and aligning my perception and narrative to what I want to radiate out versus what I'm taking in, and then just basically perpetuating the negativity.
Right. I love it. You said radiate. I love that word. Or emanate. We get to emanate, right? The change we wish to see.
Yeah.
You're getting pretty good at it too.
It blows me away. I wear bright colors.
I've seen that. I saw that on your website.
And it's just a natural thing that I think ever since I did the abstracts, I just start wearing. I got rid of all my neutrals in my closet, and like, there's no. When would I not want to wear a color that enlivens me? And awesome. I find it amazing how many people just look, and I mean, I have a subtle smile or smile on my face at all time. Like I'm a big believer in just lifting the corners of your mouth. I even taught my students, don't go into a big grin, like, because could be mostly is fake usually, but just as lifting your corners. But so it's just keeping your energy in this up spirit so that my energy is radiating. And I also am very aware that I'm wearing these colors, but I can't, but like just yesterday again, like people stop and want to take a picture, like,
You need
and
to
they
walk around with a
smile.
cup.
Yeah, right. They pass me and just smile real big, and then
Like my
they might.
mom, Virginia, you've seen pictures of my mom, right?
Oh yeah.
Just
I've met her.
everyone notices her smile, but like you said, even if it's not a full smile, I don't know, I don't even know if it was conscious, but she always had a little upturned, impish
Yeah.
smile. The corners were always upturned, and then the eyes. She never looked old. She just died in January, but she never looked old because
Oh.
she kept her red hair magically, but there was just a twinkle in her eye, and it's the smile in your eye. It makes
Yeah.
you exude youth. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
so
it's
do
all.
people say it, or do they just bask in it? Do they
Well, it's
comment on
different.
your clothes and
Different people do different things, I mean, the people that actually say something about whatever color I'm wearing, I say, isn't color a powerful thing? Isn't if I'm wearing pink, isn't pink a happy color? Or, I try to make reference to the energy of color, and then they go, yeah, it's kind of like, you're right.
it's funny in my artwork. You start to trust yourself more and get bolder with color. I think that's the general arc, right? Once you really feel safe, I think. I mean, there's a metaphor here, right? So in teaching oil painting, you might say, start out monochromatic. That's quote unquote safe, right? And then you start doing complementary, and then maybe get into a split complement. But then hopefully, eventually, you can just find the right color accents to fully saturate without assaulting the rods and cones of the eye, right? And so I love in my own space. Like I said, my space is very important to me. I just fully decided no more neutrals, no more earth tones. I'm going to do splashes of color. Do you know what I mean? But you find the right relationship on the color wheel to saturate, and it's still harmonious. But of
Yeah.
course, it says something about your spiritual journey.
Yeah.
It was very clear when I started, and I might have gone overboard, having color accents in my house. Do you guys relate to that at all?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I might have gone too far. I went with like a, what do they call it? Like a, what do you call the bold blue and white stripes? Is that bay something or other? It's like an East Coast bold blue and
Oh,
white stripes.
yeah, I know what you're
It's
talking about.
Provincetown, Rhode Island.
Yeah, and I can't think of what you're talking. I know what you're talking about though.
So I extended my curtains all the way to the ceiling. So there's these bold, blue stripes. And then I found accents. Actually, I did it to a painting of John Watkins painting. I modeled my whole living room after the painting. But then you feel like, uh-oh, am I assaulting my guests? Not that I have a lot.
Okay, I felt that your place was very serene when I walked in. I felt very
You didn't feel
balanced.
attacked.
I did not feel attacked. No, since I have been there, I can say that. No,
Thank you.
I
It was a
actually
bold statement, though. But it was an important
yeah.
step for me.
Sounds inspiring.
And I'm a dude too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. That's awesome.
yeah. And by the way, your house when I brought my daughter to come visit you, Nick, she has been slowly transforming her room and using some of those schemes. So
Oh no, I don't want to
yeah.
be responsible for that. Anyway, but actually, my paint. Do you notice the John Watkins painting? That's the one after
Mm.
which I modeled it. Strangely, that is my prized possession.
Mm.
It's my, and other pieces people have given me. Of course, Greg hasn't. As much as I beg, he's never given me any artwork. But yeah, it's that it means something to me. But
Yeah.
yeah, that could, and so maybe, yeah, a personal portrait down the line. That could be interesting.
But Joan, I
Anyway,
like how
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I love that Joan brought up, color though, and how you've gotten rid of, your neutral color schemes and more brighter colors because I think sometimes we forget that what we surround ourselves with sets our mood and our tone and
Mm.
energy throughout the day.
That
And
explains your fingernails.
yes, yes, my very decorative fingernails. Because for me, I mean, and coming from a fashion background,
Mm.
I've noticed that it also says, I think it also speaks, I don't want to say like self-confidence in the fact that, you're just a super confident person, but I feel like when you're willing to introduce colors or patterns or whatever it is that, you tend to shy away from, and just like small tidbits of it, you start to build that internal confidence and
Mm-hmm.
power
Mm-hmm.
within yourself. And I feel like, that's basically, a lot of what you've been saying, Joan, like what you've done with, your personal power portraits, the fact that you've added the color. It's learning to let that authentic self that's inside of us actually show, because we're so afraid to let
Mm.
people get close to us.
Right. Or we want to blend in and not draw
Mm-hmm.
attention to ourselves.
Right.
I think
I,
women might learn that one, do you know what I mean, pretty early on. I love seeing how people express themselves. I have a niece whose hair is magenta one week and blue the next. I love it,
yeah,
you know.
hair color is fun these days, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
well, I
when,
kind of grew up with that, and that's what I was referring
yeah,
to. Like, I love that teenagers do have an image.
yeah,
I had no category for image, you know.
yeah.
I credited myself with, well, I'm secure. I don't need to. I have this premise too, like if you um are, I don't know, secure, you don't need to put much attention on your image. So even though I'm a free thinker, right, and I've always thought outside the box, and I kind of identified with or prided myself on never buying socialization to begin with. I'm an artist, I'm a rebel, and yet I never felt the need. It would have taken more effort to go out and find funky clothes on Melrose than to just wear a t-shirt and jeans. So, do you know what I mean? I don't immediately look like a free thinking artist because but the thing that makes me free thinking is that I don't take the time to go to Melrose and stand
Mm.
out. I don't know, but I'm over that now. If anything, I tried to be James Dean, right? Virginia, you that was my one image in high school, James Dean.
Oh, that's cool.
There's worse things, right?
There's worse things. I had a student once that, when I was teaching school, I wore a black shirt that had like a colorful kind of things in the center. But she said, Miss Marie, why are you wearing black? And I was like, well, it has like a colorful. She said, Miss Marie, we depend on you. I was like, oh my gosh. And I still get that. If there's a day that I might, the color I'm wearing is more pastel or white or something, people that know me out, whatever, even salespeople
Right.
go, where's your, color or whatever. I was like, whoa, it's
They're counting
amazing
on
what an
you.
impact. Yeah, because it added energy to them. They can't do it themselves at that age,
Mm.
apparently, so they have to, isn't it interesting?
They get a vicarious, yeah.
Yeah. So then I start feeling responsible,
You're allowed to have a
Well,
goth. You can have a goth day here and there.
yeah, yeah. There are those days that you just kind of want to be a little more quiet,
Well, Greg
not
was
too.
right. You definitely exude positive energy. I am going to use the word. You didn't allow yourself to, but it seems inspiring. How about that? Inspiring
Oh, I
energy.
love it. Thank you.
Yeah, and well, I've said that too a lot of times that some of us have a craft, some of us don't. I don't like to hear people that say, "I'm not creative." I'm the one
Mhm.
that's going to go, "Okay, but you just hosted a dinner and you made all that food
Exactly.
yourself." So I don't like
Exactly.
that, but I get that some people don't identify as an artist because we save that label, right, for people
Hmm.
that send rockets into space or so, but I do think we're all creative in our own ways. I had a
Yes.
point. Hold on. That we all express ourselves in different ways, I guess. And
Yeah.
you don't need the label of artist to be a creative being.
No,
Sometimes.
just embrace your uniqueness. That's my goal,
Mm.
just to discover your uniqueness and be it and love it. It
I
doesn't
guess
matter. And you
that's
don't
what I
have to
was.
be this big thing either. Like you don't have to be this big name or big success or whatever, quote
Mhm.
unquote success. Just enjoying your simple life is huge, you know.
That's what I was headed toward in my in my babbling was I've said for years, I have a friend who, yes, she's a dancer, so she has a craft. But truly, just breathing, she's an inspiration to be around because does
Yeah,
that make sense? Like every movement is art.
totally.
The way she moves her body, it's art to the rest of
Hmm.
us.
Hmm.
So I love that too. You can
Hmm.
just yeah, emanate or exude or radiate something into the world, and that is your artistic expression in a way.
Hmm.
My niece is expressing herself with her hair color, you know?
Hmm.
And you're creating performance art for everybody else.
Hmm. Beautiful.
So keep it up, Joan. You're doing good
Well,
work. You're doing good work in the world.
like I said, I believe life is supposed to be fun, so you just really have to, define it for yourself what fun is for you and do it.
Beautiful.
Because nothing else matters. Like money doesn't go with you when you die,
Right,
and
right.
no, and all that matters is who you've made happy, and how how you feel, just the energy that you're feeling. That's what you take with you, is the expansion of your soul,
Mm,
and how much you've helped other people, whether it's one or two or thousands, like just if you helped a few people, like that's all that really matters, and get down to that basic feeling, instead of all this other stuff that's in the
mhm.
way of trying to be like somebody else and not good enough, and competition, and oh my gosh, get rid of it all,
It's a dead end
so
road. Yeah.
it's so frustrating. It makes
Yeah.
life so like, what is life? And no one knows what life is other than just follow your heart, like the heart math. Go to yay, heart math, and
It's
all these
beautiful.
people.
Yeah. I think a lot of
Oh,
people buy into a lot of, so like we said, socialization and societal expectations, even parental expectations. And a lot of artists have to quiet those voices to embrace their calling, right? But I
yeah.
think too, it's normal to think about legacy, and that could take the form of quote unquote success, as we said, or got to make my living as an artist or I failed. I've talked to many of my students, former students, who feel that they're not a real artist and like unless they're making their living at it. But yeah, your legacy is never what you think it is, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
probably the people you touched and not any of your accomplishments or accolades. So anyway, we all step into that at some point, I think.
Well,
Kind of
and
because
the
it's ego, right? Everything else is ego, like the career.
yeah, like the challenges that were because I had this meditation where, okay, I want to grow spiritually as high as I can. So what will, just throw it at me or whatever. I don't know how I worded it, but I'm open,
Hmm.
and I mean, oh my gosh, was I thrown challenges.
Yeah, careful what you ask for. Yeah.
Oh my Lord. I mean, not because this is a whole nother topic, but I was diagnosed with leukemia, and like now I've healed that naturally, without the chemo, and just in the process of healing all that. And there's much more to the story, which we won't go into, but in the process of studying, all that, the power of the mind and the power of joy and the power of laughter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's where it is, just
Laughter is the
staying
best
at,
medicine. It's
oh
not just
my
a platitude.
gosh, not getting stressed. I mean, stress is what caused it.
Of
I mean, I got
course.
to the bottom of it and I was like, oh my gosh, putting myself down and having, anger towards whatever. We'll not go into that, but
Well, I'm gonna
stress.
I'm gonna jump in though because I think we would agree emotional stress equals inflammation.
Oh, totally,
Inflammation equals disease. People
totally.
resist that at every turn
It's a
because they don't want to
fact.
take responsibility. Of course, it's
I
a
am,
fact.
yeah,
But I think
total
too,
fact.
what we don't do is we don't recognize that what is meant by stress. You know what? It's also emotional stress. It's those
Mm-hmm.
feelings you were carrying around.
Yep.
So,
Mhm.
our vibration. I used to be that guy, like we talked about embracing the shadow, Thomas More, not putting value judgments on things. They just are. Well, I went
Mm-hmm.
too far with that to where
Mm-hmm.
most of my life I thought, well, most people operate on the pleasure principle. I see the value in melancholy. I see the value in depression. And, I talked myself into that. But you know what? The bottom line is, when feelings are toxic in your body.
Mm-hmm.
It could be feelings of like lack of self-worth or, not loving yourself. All of those things constitute emotional stress, right? So
Totally.
anyway, so I've been not on a similar journey where I just had to learn from the inside out that self-love is very real. It's not just a platitude, and that health depends on it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, 100%.
I was gonna say that both of you have touched on, something that I had said back when we did our story in politics, and when I talked about the individualistic and the collective
Hmm.
personas that we have out there, and ideologies. And I think, when you talk about individually, understanding our self-love and finding the joy and purpose in our life. But it's when we get to that part of the stepping stone of the individualistic ideology, then we have to go into the collective ideology of, where does be as an individual then fit in the collective that brings the wholeness to all and that human, experiment.
Well, let me ask if this is what you're hinting at. I think when we talk about, manifestation, well, it's selfish to align. There is that mentality like if if you take the time to have a practice, as we said, or whether that's meditation or prayer or chanting or Kabbalah, I've done them all, right? But if you prioritize that, oh, that's selfish because you're not providing for your family in the ways that they need you to, right? Well, but the bottom line is you have more to offer a relationship, a family, if you align, right?
Correct.
I don't know if that was related at all, but
Yes,
that's what I
no,
heard.
that's exactly what it is. Yeah, and
Oh, but
that's
also, okay, then I'm going to go on.
yeah.
Because I've always said, self-love gets a bad rap too, because people hear confidence. You know what I mean? Like confidence is overrated to me, because it's usually maybe an ego-driven concept, right? Whereas true self-love or intrinsic value, that's the words I use. To embrace your intrinsic value is actually not confidence, it's self-love. And yeah, the benefit, like the ripple effect, like you're saying, that is selfless, not selfish, because right, the world is depending on you to be your most authentic self and to find your gifts, whether it's within a craft or just in life. Find those gifts.
You're dead on, and that's exactly what I was hearing, and all that just made me really think about that in so many ways, because like you just said, I think people think they're being selfish, and so they see that negative connotation to it, and it's not, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, and doing it in a selfless way where you're not expecting a payout at the end. You're just doing it because you know that there's a benefit, no
Yeah, my
matter.
sister's TED Talk. You met Renee twice now. My sister's TED Talk is about exactly that. So we've said today you need to quiet a lot of voices of doubt to embrace a calling as an artist. But one of them is that it's selfish. There, and women have it the worst, by the way. She screened a film called Who Does She Think She Is? And I would say women got written out of the art history books for a million reasons, and they're all the wrong reasons. But, and I don't know if I buy the premise of this documentary 100%, but it's like, yeah, I'm sorry, you're supposed to be a wife and a mother and be all things to all people. You don't get to express yourself, So I do think women get the shit end of this stick on that one. And that, so Renee's TED Talk is entirely about how the word, and I've heard so many definitions of the word art, but, one of them being artifice, which I don't buy. But she was saying, there's a huge history of it meaning to fit. So you're finding your puzzle piece in, now I'm going to mix metaphors. How about this? You're finding that puzzle piece in the tapestry that is humanity. You're finding your thread, right, in this tapestry, or your tile in the collage. And so, yeah, you got to get rid of the shame surrounding this trope of expressing yourself being selfish. The universe, I mean, literally on a biological level, we're being called upon by epigenetics to be, right, to fulfill our own potential and therefore evolve humanity in our own one, right, little authentic way.
Right.
It's biological to me.
I agree 100%.
I've said that twice today. I'm going to shut up. Now, we're trying to make the podcast more of a conversation lately, because sometimes people come on and they plug their wares and we highlight them beautifully and their brand. But I think the magic lies in the conversation. So thanks for indulging me, Joan. I do think some great stuff has come up. You don't even know. You'll listen back and go, wow, that's going to be a major value. We always do. I think there's some good stuff for our listeners. But maybe to start to bring it toward a close, did we get to everything? Is there anything you're really motivated this week, this moment, to impart to our listeners? We're going to put some links, by the way, in the episode description. You mentioned at least one workshop. Would you want us to put that link in the description?
Well, I'd love a link to Jim Fortin's podcast,
Exactly,
or TCP. that's important for me.
Sure.
But and the other link, I could send it if you're interested. It's something brand new. I just was exposed to Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton and all those people that
Oh,
are,
I love
you know,
Bruce. Yeah, I
yeah.
just read Biology of Belief. Have you read that?
Yes,
Oh my
and
God.
Jim Fortin interviewed but Bruce Lipton on his podcast as well.
Okay, we
Um,
want that link for sure. Yeah.
yeah, it's wonderful, and his classes are wonderful. But yeah, the biggest thing that I'm just so excited about, because I've released been through a lot of heavy negativity, where just like a couple months ago I spent a whole day wishing I were not here anymore.
Oh.
And I was like, what is that all about? Like, happy me, like always
Mm.
positive, always bouncing back, like what? So I had to really dig deep. And when it's all about love of self so that you can love others, and feeling one, getting rid of that not getting rid of the ego, but like you said, connecting, using the ego for the positive things,
Mm-hmm.
but to feel one with the world, with the plants, the animals, and feel, just that interconnectedness is so huge. And that's the only way the world's going to heal through this traumatic time that we're going, not traumatic, the big changes that are about to evolve. Once we feel one and dig deeper to our soul connection, and not depend on the on the outer world filling, being the solution. If the outer world is not the solution and the inner world is solid, then we can handle new changes and be okay with change, because we're so resistant to change. And so I'm just really big on that right now, to really get connected. And I think my art is going to take a shift to express that more. I don't know where it's going to go. That's all brand new. But
As long as you're meditating on interconnectivity, it's happening already, right?
yeah,
In your work.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it happens with each portrait, and I will always do the portraits because they're such a high for me, and so I feel like it's a real service, and it's just
I
a
do
high for.
think, just to go back to something you said, I do think we're looking for our governments to solve problems for us,
Yeah.
and that, yeah, we're being called upon to self-regulate. And anyway, you said a lot of beautiful things there, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but but I just wanted to throw that out there, that Marianne Williamson talks a lot about how, yeah, we're looking for daddy, and
Yeah.
or maybe finally mommy. But
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that is the paradigm that's shifting in government too, is fascism is on the horizon, but do we really want that? Are we capable of self-regulating and governing ourselves, or do we need our government to, I mean, it goes back to Aristotle and the tripartite
Mm-hmm.
state, that, this idea that we're not capable of governing ourselves, that there's a whole ruling class, because that's what we're being asked to face. Do we want to become a North Korea, right? Or a Russia? Or do we want to self effing regulate? Sorry, is that related to this idea of solving our own problems and not looking to the outside world for solutions?
It starts with us. It's energy, energy, energy. That's all there is,
Yeah.
So, I mean, we are not going to see change, the good change that really can happen if we don't start with, feeling our own energy and then sending it out and feeling connected. And I've been tested big time with some personal things that I've not conquered, but I've made come full circle,
Well, how
to
did you
where
get out of that? You said you had a dark day. How did you pull out of that?
listening to Jim Fortin.
Exactly. That's what I do. I listen to
Yeah.
my muses. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not gurus, but I listen to the stuff that lifts me up. And
Just,
Virginia knows I had that day yesterday.
yeah.
I was going to throw in the towel, and it does come out of the blue. You think,
Yeah.
I've been doing so good, and then yesterday, I swear to God, I was ready to go live in the LA Wash with my dog and just expire. I was
Yeah.
done fighting.
Right.
So yeah, I guess we're never out of the woods, right?
Yeah, and then it's back to the roller coaster. I mean, I have a set of oracle cards that I put together, and on the back, that's the first line is "Life is a roller coaster."
And you never
So
arrive.
Yeah, and so scream, laugh, and twirl with the twists,
I like that.
So like, just have, it's all good. It's all life, and embrace being human.
I was gonna
That
say, well, it's gonna take a while for me to laugh about yesterday. Like, I'm not gonna have a sense of humor about it for a while, but eventually I will.
Yeah. Well, it was kind of a snap. I think, sometimes it just takes a period of time where you just kind of have to go through the feeling bad about it for, and
That
do
takes wisdom, though, because they say this too will pass.
yeah.
It takes wisdom to know, you know what, tomorrow's another day. I
Yeah.
do, I do joke like a full belly helps, coffee helps. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even Scarlett O'Hara said, tomorrow is another day, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
to have enough life experience to know that's true. This too will pass.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, faith comes back to faith.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've said it a couple times. Last
And when it
chance.
doesn't happen
Final
right
word.
away,
Okay.
you just know sometimes it just, like I said, it just takes a little period of time, but know that it will, because your goal is for it to shift, like
Mm,
if you're really giving up, it lasts more than a day, and then it's
yes.
a
Then
deeper issue where you might have to have hypnosis or really truly give it up. I don't know.
or
But
yeah, I think everybody, Virginia, on the psychology end of things, right? There's a cry for help. There's a whole process if you
yeah.
really are not going to snap out of your depression. I mean, you can chime in on that in 1 second, but Marianne Williamson talks true. It is about embracing the shadow, because we are so quick to medicate in this society and just make the bad stuff go away. And yes, actually, we're meant to sit with, right? Sit with the dark or the shadow sometimes in order to have that, or the crucible, however you want to put it, in order to have that transformation and come out the other end. I think society has been trained to think, oh, I just treat this with a pharmaceutical. I don't, and we
Mhm.
quickly label things depression. How about that? Let's use the word melancholy from the turn of the century, where, oh, it's part of life. This is how I grow and transform. And I'm going to live with the melancholy, knowing, yes, knowing tomorrow's another day.
Yeah.
Virginia, go.
I would say what, so ironically, it's known as the crisis state,
Mm,
is what it is. And I know when people hear that, they automatically think like, well, that means you had to have like really big events, like when we had 9/11, and
an
that's those.
existential crisis, one of the
Yeah, yeah.
crises. Okay.
So basically, you have your situational crisis, and then you have your personal emotional crisis. So we have them daily in our lives. The real big thing is where we're at resiliency wise. So like you're saying, I mean, unfortunately, here in the U.S., we like to medicate. We love our
Mm,
pharmaceuticals. We love
mm,
pharmacology. And so what's really important is when we hit that is having that support network around us.
mm,
So like you're saying, having your muses, your, shamans, your ministers, whatever it is around you that can identify that you're in that crisis state. So you get that immediate, basically they come in, bringing up the ego. So they basically become your, oh gosh, I'm going to get it wrong. I can't think of it right now. There's a term. It's not just ego. It's ego is something else. Anyways, where they basically bring you back to the reality and keep you in reality while you do that. Why so you are more receptive to seeing that light at the end of the tunnel versus the doom and gloom, and then your
mhm,
inhibitions get lower because
mhm.
you're just constantly in that state of stress and heightened hyperactive,
Right.
state of situational awareness. So yeah,
Well, and to
unfortunately.
bring Bruce Lipton back into this, by the way, Bruce
Hmm.
Lipton talks about growth or protection responses, right?
Hmm. You're
So
right.
recently I've thought about the culture medium, right? If blood is a culture medium and too much, like an allergen comes into that culture medium, the protective response is too much antihistamine. I mean, too much histamine, right?
Hmm.
But everything can be thought of that way, where there's a growth or a protection response. And so maybe that's what's meant by crucible. When you have that challenge thrown in your spiritual path, you can avoid it, like medicate and completely avoid it, and that's the chemical right response.
Right.
So he would also say energetic responses trump chemical responses, right? So we try to treat everything in Western medicine with a Newtonian approach, right? Kill a bunch of cells, in hopes of targeting the right ones. And that's chemical. But energetic is actually where the growth response lies.
Hmm.
So that's a parable, or I guess, sorry, a metaphor for your thoughts and feelings are that non-local energetic response. Shift your thoughts and feelings, and most of that inflammation, meaning disease, will resolve. I
Correct.
think
Yeah.
we
And
figured it all out here.
yeah, we always do. And
I
it
just
seems like
really wanted to bring Bruce Lipton back into the
no,
conversation.
and no, and that's exactly it. And yeah, and
But it takes
every
time
day.
too, right?
Hmm.
We want quick fixes. We want quick
Mhm.
fixes. I don't think this anymore, but I used to say I'm all for pharmaceuticals if it gets you up off the couch to go to therapy and maybe find productive ways of, kind of balancing your brain chemistry. Thank God for Western medicine. It's the only reason I'm alive, actually. So I'm
Yeah.
not anti pharmaceuticals, but I do think sometimes there's a journey, however long it takes, I'm going to balance my brain chemistry.
I was
That's, yeah,
yeah, no, you're right. And I think what you're which is what exactly what you're saying, Nick, is pharmaceuticals are important, but they're short, they're a band-aid
it's a
fix.
quit. Right, right.
They're not a long-term fix. And unfortunately, we've gotten into that long-term fix mentality, and we need to get back to it's a band-aid, to
Hmm.
where we have to understand there's gonna change is always uncomfortable. It
Right.
just is. And
Well,
and
again, sorry.
go no, I think you're gonna probably say this, and that's the thing. We've gotten to where we don't like being in that
Right,
discomfort,
right.
and we've got to move past that.
Societally, right.
Hmm.
We want the quick fix, and actually, sometimes things are just what they are. Like we said, it doesn't need to be fixed. But Bruce Lipton again would point out that again. I know I'm sounding anti. I'm sounding antidepressant. I'm not, but it's he would say the history of medicine is the history of the placebo effect. Something
Hmm.
like, don't quote me, but go to the biology of belief, Bruce Lipton, if you want, and fact check me. I think it was something like 90% of whether it's, whichever antidepressant you want to talk about, but across the board, 90% is the placebo effect.
Hmm. No, you're
It's because
correct.
societally, oh, okay. Yeah, well, we'll bring that up on another episode once we fact check it. But I think the idea is it's not just the individual believes it's going to work, and thank God for the placebo effect. It's faith. There's faith healers that have a lot of value, but it's that societally we bought into all the commercials about antidepressants, right? So
Mhm.
it's like we bought into the status quo, so we therefore believe it's going to work. Nothing wrong with that. But I just think sometimes we want the quick fix instead of going, I'm meant to live with this depression at least for a few days or this existential crisis, whatever it is, because there's spiritual growth at the end of it.
Yeah, and that's a
Am I
good
just
thing.
preaching
No,
now?
no, you're not preaching.
It
I think
happens.
sometimes no, you're not. Like you said, I think we forget those things, and there's good and bad to everything, and
I
we
got to throw in the word magic here because
yeah.
because like when I was going through that, it was like you're guided to the right book. Like if it's Bruce Lipton's book or like I locally there was a place called the chakra healing room where two ladies run and they do Reiki sessions and all kinds of things. And I didn't know about this, and I was just like it landed for me to to do a session with them, and I cried, and we shared an integration session where I talked about things, and I am not a crier. I'm kind of stoic, and it released because the physical one-on-one, like how I ended up meeting them and how I ended up meeting another lady after that and had this conversation and this experience. And like to me, that's magic. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't sit and say, okay, where can I get help? It
Mm-hmm.
just it
Yes.
magically flowed. If when you're seeking quietly and asking for direction, that's I call it magic.
I love
Just
that.
things just come to you, and
Well,
it's just so exciting
the
because that's
word
how life
grace,
is.
it's beautiful, beautiful. And again, things appear, like you were hinting at, the right book appears when you need it, right?
Hmm.
The universe provides what you need. So just this week, I was thinking not magic, but I was thinking again. Marianne Williamson talks about grace. No, she talks about miracle. A miracle is the shift from fear to love.
Hmm.
But that is by the grace of God. You can't plan that shit. Like for you to suddenly have that shift and see through, again, the eyes of love instead of fear, that is a miracle. Or the word grace has been used like, you're in an argument with your spouse, for example. And you suddenly know, if I say that, I can't take it back. To have the right, to have the forethought and the patience to not say that very damaging thing, that is grace. And that's magic. I'm just agreeing with you. That seems like magic to me. You can't force a spiritual epiphany, or you can't force growth.
Yeah.
It
Back to trust.
comes from the universe. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Trusting the flow.
I was gonna say, earlier you talked about not over intellectualizing things, and I think we've done enough of that. So, Virginia, is there anything else you'd like to add, or should we give her a moment to think about her final words of wisdom? What do you? Anything else to add, Virginia?
I don't. I think we've covered it all, and I'm just waiting for the world peace.
I was going to say, did we create world peace? Maybe next week after the elections. God, we have so many episodes lined up, but part of me is like, am I going to be on an island after November 4th? Or seems weird to plan anything right now. Am I being a doom speaker, or am I catastrophizing?
That's fear. That's fear.
I know. I'm being a little facetious. It did feel weird to plan that far ahead, though. Like, it's going to be hard not to talk about the elections no matter what happens.
It will be a new season for us to learn in.
I love that. Woo!
Just
Okay,
plan
Joan.
with things that you can cancel, like if it has to be, it doesn't matter. Just kind of leave it open and be fine. That's just it. We make plans, but we have to be open to let it go. That's the, that whole method.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, don't be
I
attached.
actually read once, even in relationships, or I wrote this into The Seeker, actually, this idea that how do you trust your partner? It came up in my story. It just happened. But I'd heard this school of thought, and I just heard my character reply, I don't have to trust my partner. I trust myself that I'll survive whatever, come what may.
Yeah. There you go. It's all back to you. It's all back to you.
So we can go to hell in a handbasket. Or there is faith too. There's this popular sentiment that if we continue to destroy the planet and we don't find a way out of this climate change, as you hinted at earlier, Joan, the earth will go on.
Yeah.
And then somebody on our podcast actually said, yeah, but we have a great relationship with this rock. The Elon Musks of the world want to just skip town and find another rock to live on. That may not be the answer. It's kind of a cop out to go, Earth will be fine without us. So I like that idea too. Let's not give up on a good thing just yet.
Love what is, that's like love what is and just let it flow. Like if it ends tomorrow, we'll all end it and we just move to another phase, whatever that is, like what does it really matter?
All good things come to an end.
Yeah. And we all die anyway at some point, but just enjoy every moment, now, and even the dark side, understand what the dark side is all about, or feel. I don't know. We've talked about it. We've kind of said, I just love that I'm just finally released of embracing the dark side and embracing the joy and just still believing that life is meant to be fun. And we're all so unique. Love yourself. It starts with that, and the love spreads, and then whatever is, but stay in the moment. We just ponder too much about future stuff and beat ourselves up about past, and all that is such a waste of energy.
Yeah. Well, now we're in Eckhart Tolle territory, right?
Well, I'm big on that.
Absolutely.
It's huge, huge.
At 19, I wrote a story, and I don't know how or why, because I didn't have the life experience or perspective, but clearly it was on my radar. But I wrote a little story called The Train Station. And this little old lady, I wouldn't say those words now, but right at the time, this little old lady was I forget, going back to her hometown, and she thought she was going to see her first love. And she was going back for a high school reunion. And then the guy she meets in this abandoned train station, they don't realize it's abandoned because there ain't no train coming. That was all symbolism, right? But they start talking in this dilapidated train station that they later learn is abandoned. There's no train coming, or the reader learns that. And he's going to a job interview, and he's going to change, he's going to suddenly everything's going to be worthwhile, and he'll finally be happy because he's got this opportunity. So she's dwelling on the past or perseverating on it, and he thinks contentment lies in the future. But they kind of miss the train station itself, which is the metaphor of the moment. So I talked about the dapples of light on the floorboards that they're not even noticing. Anyway,
at
that's 19, cool. I was a smart kid, man. I was a wise kid.
Well, that's a sign of who you are, like the depth was there, right there. That's cool.
Well, it wasn't on my radar again until suddenly I thought about that the other day. There is no time, right? So, would you guys feel like your sense of aesthetics has remained the same over your lives, or the things that
No,
are on your radar, or do they evolve?
they evolve.
Yeah, evolve definitely.
Hmm. I think the common threads are because that is your soul too. Like the
Hmm.
things I think of the little kid, and there were things that have not changed, and that to me is my core essence. Anyway, Joan, you said some really beautiful things, and we should have probably ended it there. I love everything you said,
Well, the
and
shaman said your job every year is to grow grow your personal power a little more every year. Just expand your connection to the world. And it just makes it nice to just let it grow as it grows and be good with it. Okay, I'm done.
okay, thank you so much. Really, there's some good stuff in there. So good to have you on. Maybe you'll come back in the future. I hope so.
Oh, it'd be awesome.
All
Thank
right,
you.
and thank you so much, and to our
Thank you for
listeners,
having me. This is
of
very
course.
fun. Thank you.
I'm
Thank
glad.
you.
I'm glad. All right, Virginia, we'll see you next time.
Mhm.
Unless you have any final words.
Nope, I'm gonna leave it there.
Yeah, we'll put our post roll where we beg for support. That'll be on the post roll. Okay, and to our listeners, remember, life is story.
Yes.
And we can get our hands in the clay. Individually and collectively, we can write a new story. See you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. We want to take a moment to thank our wonderful listeners and supporters. Your continued support and sharing of our podcast helps us spread the transformative power of storytelling. If you enjoy our episodes, please rate and review us on your favorite platform and share the podcast with friends and family. For more enriching conversations and insights, subscribe to Language of the Soul podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media and visit our Patreon website for the latest updates and exclusive content. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories to life. If you'd like to support us further, consider joining our Patreon community for exclusive content and donation options. Every bit of support helps us reach more hearts and minds.